Hello, everybody. We are so happy to be with you today. If you have arrived at the July Rainbow Inspirations, you are in the right place. You are on the right plane, and you can be prepared to be inspired today. I'm so excited to be getting to know a new friend and ally, Steve Stonecypher. Did I get that right, Steve?
You did. Thank you.
Great, great. Yeah, Steve comes to us from the Triad region. He is living here in North Carolina, and for our Rainbow Inspirations, we are branching out across the state to make sure that we continue to tell the stories of people in our community who are making a difference and hopefully leaving you feeling inspired. My name's Rebecca Chaplin, and I'm joined by Steve today, and we're just gonna chat a little bit about the novel, the novelle of Steve's life, and I believe strongly you're going to receive something that inspires you. So, Steve, let's just start at the beginning. Where were you born? And yeah, tell us a little bit about your origins, your kind of coming into your own in the world.
Right. Right. Well, thank you, Rebecca, for having me and AARP for doing this and sponsoring this. It's much appreciated. So the story, as Rebecca and I have had this conversation, when we talk about our story, I like to say it's really more of a novel, a novella, right? Because it's ongoing. Um, but I was born and raised out in the West Coast, in Los
Hmm,
Angeles.
hmm,
So I left there after college. Um, and for some reason, I mean, not for some reason, but I thought I wanted to become a physician. So I went through the process and then made the determination that wasn't what I wanted. Um, I'd always worked in healthcare and insurance companies. So I was then working in Texas and I lived in Texas for a number of years. Um, I was relocated to the Carolinas in around 2002. And it was there shortly after that I met, my now deceased partner. Um, he had been from New York and I was from Los Angeles, so it was kind of odd, to meet in North Carolina, but it made sense because I had been working in this sort of diagnostic space, and he had been in design, so it was a good sort of fit. So, fast forward a number of years, and about 7 years ago, his health turned, and I became the primary caretaker. Uh, Meanwhile, we're trying to work full time and travel and do business and having to coordinate, bringing people in, home health and various things to help. And then the last, probably year and a half, he kept telling me, you've been working for other people, but you've never been fully satisfied or happy with those, and maybe it's time to try to do this on your own. So, uh, with all of that, and that also would give me some flexibility to be at home and not travel. Went out on my own and created a consulting firm in diagnostics with a business partner. And we've been doing that for almost 6 years. But during that process, his health continued to turn and deteriorate, and he passed away in summer of 2017.
okay.
Um,
Hmm,
but that really sort of spurred me. I'd sort of been on the periphery, and if you would have asked me uh, 10 years ago, would I be doing this interview right now? I would have probably said no.
hmm,
But it's helped um, me to get moving forward. And what I mean by that is when he was ill and when he passed, I didn't know where to go. I didn't know where the resources were. I didn't know people that I could talk with or get support from. And when he passed, I felt the same. So that really spurred me to start saying, look, I can't be the only one out there that's gone
mhm,
through this and been through this process.
mm.
And anybody who's important to me in my personal life, I don't want them to have to struggle with this.
Yeah.
Um, so I initially got engaged and still am engaged with what is Sage Central North Carolina, out of
Great.
Raleigh. And I'm still engaged there. But a year ago, started what we have here is a 50 plus group. And it really started more as a social group. And we took that group to now we're a year in, and we've done some aligning with the Sage of Central North Carolina. We're aligning with a lot of organizations to create not just social aspects, to start to create education and other opportunities for people, including starting to look at what organizations are inclusive and receptive to people of the LGBTQ community. So it's really been a process, and we joke about story versus novel, and it is because as we start to deal with who or not deal but become who we are, it's a process. Some people flip a switch and here I am, but others you have to learn to accept yourself and love yourself before you can put that love out to the world.
Wow. So there's a lot to unpack in that.
Yes, yes,
Thank you for all that great context setting and sharing about your experience. And I want to kind of start where you ended,
right,
and then we'll backtrack a little
okay,
bit. But you speak about kind of the ongoing journey and how you've really started to open up into this area of recognizing you don't want other people to go through what you went through and trying to seek resources as a caregiver, and you wanted to make that more accessible to others.
right,
So this is the part of the reason we were introduced, is because you are an innovator in this way. You are helping to open up opportunities for people to receive access to resources, information,
right.
LGBTQ community members who are caregivers. Tell us a little bit more about, like, what that sort of looks like. Is it in-person events? Is it virtual? How's it going, to create this sort of resource group? Tell us more.
Well, it's what we started with in the Greater Triad. It was really more social, because that's if you look at it in the broader context, that's an easy place to start, or
Mhm.
easier place, we'll say. It's maybe going to dinner, going to the movies, going for walks. Those are pretty straightforward. Um, but working and being a part of Sage Central Carolina and some of the things that they're doing, which are part of Sage USA, which they do a lot of education and advocacy.
Mhm.
And there are organizations who become Sage certified, meaning that they've gone through a sort of process of education as well as training. And so looking at what a lot of these organizations are doing, and that's sort of what we aspire towards, and what we're looking towards getting or going towards is maybe looking at the HRC, some of their parameters, what make a equitable city. Maybe can we apply some of those to organizations who might service the seniors,
Mhm.
whether that's home health, whether that's transportation, whether that's just a DME provider, or pharmacy, and any of those that what could service the community. And I'm saying senior, maybe I should use the term mature adults or older adults, because you know uh, we never know when we might need some of these services.
Right.
But making sure that people can be who they are and not feel like they have to sort of hide that. Um,
What's yours to do inside of helping others? I hear you painting the framework of, like, the social activities and maybe even a projection of where this group is going. But what is it that you bring? Like, are you a volunteer? Are you a paid participant, or, a contributor? And
you know,
personally, like, what do you bring to the table that can help others kind of access their own opening up to authenticity?
I am purely a volunteer, so
Mhm.
this has been done purely out of a passion project.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Um, I still work a full-time job. Luckily, with the consulting and being, one of the principals, I have some flexibility. Um, but it is purely volunteer. And so the way I kind of look at myself is I am sort of a connector, a networker.
Mhm.
Getting people together and figuring out where everybody can fit
Mhm.
from organizations and organization standpoint. Um, but from the individual level, I like working with people and building things that can support people. So if we can continue to do that, and we've had a number of conversations with our team. If we can get one person and impact one person, that's one more person than that was impacted yesterday.
When you say impacted, like, because when I hear your story, I know that you're working on this macro level. You're bringing people together, you're bringing systems together. It seems like you do this pretty naturally. But then I also know that there's a party that really works with individuals, and
Right.
that you can. What does it mean to help one individual in your mind?
Well, just through experiences, and especially when you're dealing or working with some of the older adults, I've come across a number of individuals who have come out later in life,
Mm-hmm.
whether they were married, and so looking for a group or a family that they can become a part of,
Mm-hmm.
in a place that they can be themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of one avenue. Another avenue could be, and this is how I really got engaged in a lot of this, was after my partner had passed away. I reached out to an organization that provides grief counseling, but because he was not part of that facility, I never got a return call. So I
Wow.
actually did some grief counseling through Sage Central, North Carolina.
Wow.
And, I was much further along in my grief cycle, but it helped me sort of get over that sort of final hump. But it also helped me to understand that that process, everybody goes through the same sort of cycles, right? The same,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and so if it's something like that, or if it's a caregiver respite, if we can connect people with those types, if they need someone just to come in for 3 hours to give them support, or if it's caregiver support. I know that the Sage team is doing something now around caregiver support, and those people can communicate and say, well, I found this helpful. And it's really about communicate, keeping the community and together,
Mm-hmm.
and saying that you're not the only one out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, you talked a little bit about, coming out later in life, and I understand and can sense from our earlier conversations that you really have a skill for supporting people in their journeys, in their novella.
Right.
You like to work with people. Tell us a little bit about your coming out time frame. Was that early on for you?
No, I would say that's part of that novella, right?
Mhm.
It's continuing.
Okay.
Um, because again, as I said, if you would ask me if I would have done something like this 5 to 7 years ago, I would have probably said no.
Mm.
So I think what has pushed me to the forefront is the passing of my partner, because we led a
Wow.
quiet life. We were on the sort of periphery, and did various things, but it wasn't you know if you had asked me if I was going to be out in front of the parade, carrying a flag, I would have said no. But also, I see, for the older adults in the gay community, typically it gears towards youth, right? And once you hit a certain age, it's almost as if you don't exist.
Mhm.
So this also helps people to say, hey, you're important. You're part of the community. You led the charge to get us where we are.
Mhm.
And let's continue to make sure that people know that you're here, and that, we can continue to do things in a positive way.
Mhm. So being visible is a part of that
Yeah.
advocacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and if we think about, 30 or 40 years ago, what were the images we saw of gay folks? They were typically very effeminate, or if there was a female, they were very, strong and masculine. And that's just one piece of the entire sort of spectrum. So if we can push people forward who, people are like, oh wow, I never knew, right? Someone that can be a face, and just to sort of break down those barriers, so that we're here, we're across the board, and we're all over.
I appreciate that you chose to be here today, and that I know that takes something in your own journey, and
Yeah,
it's for the whole. It's for the good of the whole.
right.
I I think about some of the ways that I have heard that you have helped to integrate those different pieces of the puzzle, and I know sometimes that there can be silos within the
Mhm.
LGBTQ community that
Absolutely.
we hang out with people like ourselves. That's just kind of tribal nature in some ways. And you also see an opportunity for us to do better by working together. And tell me a little bit about some of the ways you've helped to build bridges between those silos.
Well, I think, well, for instance, pretty much out of the gate, there were some. We started having some. Let me back up. There's a very large social group here. It's a lesbian social group, and so some of the ladies had been a part of some of the events that the 50, what we call our 50 plus older adult group, were doing, and connected me with the leader of Karen Obad, who's the leader of the lesbian social group, and so we've been able to do joint events where we
Mhm,
go to restaurants and take over restaurants, or we've done joint social events, and we're looking to do more events like that to continue to sort of build those bridges. And again, and one of the areas that I'm continuing to try to figure is obviously with our BIPOC community. How do we continue to make sure that they're included, as well as our trans community as well?
mhm.
That we want to make everybody feel comfortable at the events that we do, and make sure that we're doing events that would bring those in, that so they can be a part of it.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you stated it like that, and I echo that sentiment on behalf of Blue Ridge Pride Generation Plus. Generation Plus is the co-host of these events, and we also are always aiming to find
Right.
ways to integrate. So that said, looking at geography, I just want to state right here, right now, that we want to work collectively with what you're doing,
Right.
especially in this virtual format. So the more we can build bridges geographically, that's great too.
No,
We have a lot to
absolutely.
learn from each other.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because if you look at what we're doing here, then Raleigh has Sage Central Carolina. There's also Sage of Wilmington, of the
Mhm.
Cape Fear Coast. So these are all servicing older adults. So as we
And
look at this,
yeah,
and you guys are there in the western part, and there's stuff going on in Charlotte, so there's stuff going on in Winston Salem. So in a virtual platform, absolutely education. It could be around caregiver support. It could be around grief counseling. It could be things such as book clubs, band book clubs, that maybe you
mhm.
don't have enough people locally, but now you find somebody who might be a retired literature professor, and that they might want to lead it. And then they might be in Asheville, but you might have people from Wilmington that want to participate. So there's ways virtually to do this.
And if you're with us here right now and you wanna type anything into the chat about, anything that you are interested in cross-fertilizing, just because that is part of Steve's theme, let us know. Go ahead and put any information you want to in the comment section. So, Steve, we've, talked a little bit about the past and how the past has informed your
Right.
present. And your focus professionally, you've still got a strong career and you're doing a lot of volunteering. And I know the future has yet to be told, but
Right.
what do you see as being possible or what's opening up for you? It looks like it might be part of the next chapter of the Steve Stonecypher novella.
Uh, wow, that's a big question.
I
That's a
know.
big
Take your time.
question. Um, I have things that I would love to do. I would love to go spend some time in Spain to continue my Spanish education. I've been studying Spanish on my own for a number of years now, so I would love to do
Wow.
things like that. I'd love to travel, and I would love to continue to travel. But I think there's a lot of work to do, especially with some of the messaging we're hearing now, especially with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and how that could impact some things that we've now taken for granted,
Mhm.
and how that could be impacted. So I think there's still a lot of work to do here, um, in our community. I know
Mhm.
there's still a struggle as people age and they go into retirement communities, and some of the communities either not accepting or not understanding. So there's still a lot of work to do, and I think there's a lot of things that we can uh, build around that. And so, for instance, one of the things on our sort of planning team, we've engaged Dr. Cotto from UNCG, and they're doing a survey right now about what kind of education the community is looking towards having. So we can do a survey and then actually put some education together around those,
Mhm.
and that could be anything from grief support to sex education. So we're not sure what that's going to look like, but I mean, it's trying to evolve and figure out what support is needed,
Mhm.
and how do we get there, and then working with organizations that want to be part of that.
Mhm. Mhm. You kind of mentioned a little bit about rights and the rights and visibility of people as they age in the LGBTQ community. And I just curious if there's anything else to be said about how the work we're doing now might inform that future, what positive changes we can be a part of. I know that the sensitivity trainings you've alluded to, encouraging that and providing education and certification for organizations that have greater awareness. And it seems like there's a lot that you do on the grassroots level already, and that your community members are doing. So, just wanted to open up if there's anything else that you want to say about the possibilities.
Well, I mean, I think as an individual and as a community, we have to make sure that we get out and do our part. And what I mean by that is, make sure you're voting, make sure you're uh, if you're not comfortable being out in front, but maybe you're supporting in some ways to the community, because where we are today could easily be stripped based on some of the rhetoric. So we just need to make sure that we continue to make sure that people are aware that we're here. Number one, but one of the things I hope is that as people age and as they do move into communities, that those communities are going to be inclusive and accepting, and that people
Hmm.
don't have to sort of go back into the closet, because we've heard. I know the Raleigh group has heard a number of stories of individuals who had to go back into the closet as they entered into facilities.
Yeah.
Um,
Part of our mission, or our mission at AARP, is to empower people to choose how they live as they age. And if people don't have the rights or a sense of safety, they're not able
no,
to
absolutely.
choose how they want to live as they age. So, yeah, well, I hope you do get to Spain, and I hope you get to also fulfill some of your personal desires as
No,
you're
thank you.
also moving your social mission forward. Um, what about your education? I'm curious just about, you seem to have the ability to bring people together and to initiate change in different parts of life. What was your formal education like?
Um, I mean, if you, uh, so I have a undergraduate degree in business, specializing in healthcare.
Okay, cool.
I took 2 years post to do all the courses necessary to go to medical school. So I've taken all the chemistry, biology, physics, calculus, all those things, additional beyond. So when I look at my education, where I went to school in California, I had to have 140 units to graduate. By the time I was done, I have over 220 with
Wow.
all these other courses that I took. Um, I also have a master's degrees in business and finance. Um,
Wow.
so those are just pieces, but I think it's the work experience, the opportunities I've been given, um, uh, how they sort of form. But I think those two different types of education, a liberal studies versus a science, education, they each teach your mind, teach you to think differently.
Mhm.
And so I
Mhm.
think that helps me in that ability to bring down complex ideas to uh, you know more easily understandable or digestible bits of information.
Well, I hope we get to tap into you in the future as we move forward, Sue, because you really do have that ability, and it's a unique gift. You've spoken a little bit about how academia and education was an influence for you. What about the
Right.
people who have
Yeah.
influenced you and the messages that are living inside of you as a result of that?
Well, obviously my parents, both my mom and dad. I lived, I said, in Southern California, and have older siblings, and it was a close knit family. But my mother became very ill when I was a child, so I became very independent at a very young age. So I learned how to do things on my own, and so my parents always were. Uh, they never had to tell me to go study. They never had to do these things. So I just did it. So I think that is part of what forms me to be driven to do things. When
Hmm.
I see a need, I do it. But both my parents were educated, and my father very stoic, a Germanic background, so very stoic, and emotion wasn't something that was displayed. Um, so that and then obviously my deceased partner Matthew was probably outside of my parents the most influential. Because I could have been formally educated, but I wasn't worldly educated, whereas he had
Mm.
traveled the world in design and those things. So that was important to him. So I became much more attuned to architecture and landscape design and music and all these different things. And so
Wow.
eh, the sort of rounding of the edges, we'll call it.
I love the way the expression on your face when you talk about Matthew and the way he rounded the edges. That's beautiful. I'm just curious. I know you met in North Carolina, but how did you meet?
I was actually at a fundraising dinner put on here by Triad Health Project for HIV and AIDS.
Wow. So talk about the
So
value of those social events.
no, absolutely, and that's part of the discussion with people. And they're like, "Well, how do I meet people?" There's no, and I said, "You have to put yourself out there. Go places, do things." And the younger generation, the older generation, it was bars or places that they sort of would congregate. Younger generation is more online using applications and things. So it's sort of that changing time, and there's enough events going on, and that's part of it. Even if you're not looking for uh, a relationship, you're looking for friends. It's a way to meet people as well.
Mm-hmm. So just put yourself out there as part of your message to others.
Yeah,
Steve, just
absolutely.
show up. Just take that next step. If you had advice to give to a younger person in the community, what advice or inspiration would you share with a younger person?
Um, that don't rush
Mm.
to make a decision or to uh, push or a judgment. That take the information in, and that's about life in general. It's about absorbing information and then deciding. If you rush to judge or rush to make a determination or decision, that and you know as we discussed earlier, whether you decide to make a decision or you decide not to make a decision, you've still made a decision. So for a younger person, don't take for granted the opportunities and the openness society has today, because as we've seen, some of those can be uh, taken away. So uh, get involved, get engaged,
Hmm.
and learn from your generation that was here before, because a lot of them were our forefathers, our forebearers of the push to get to where we are.
Wow. So don't rush to make a decision, but show up and listen and learn from others. And um,
Absolutely.
how would that advice be adapted to an older adult in the community, or would it be the same?
No, I think it'd be the same, because if we look at the and I can say from experience, the terminology used in the older generation. For instance, my partner Matthew didn't like the term partner. I was
Mm,
his friend. But that goes back to the experience of being in the city, where you could walk down the street, and if you had a little too much swag in your walk, you could be arrested.
wow.
So, people, if they went to a bar that was, mixed, if there was a raid, they would immediately, get together and start dancing with the other sex, because, there was that potential of getting thrown in jail. And then having your information put into the paper Monday morning.
Wow.
So the terminology is different. So now the younger generation is working towards taking back the word queer, which the
Mhm.
older generation finds offensive.
Mhm.
The younger generation is more attuned with pronouns. Some of the older generation is not.
Mhm.
So, I mean, there's differences in it, and it's the ability to understand both sides.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh,
Once again, that bridging, softening of the
absolutely.
edges. Yeah. Well, we did have one comment. Bob T said, "Go to Spain." So that's
Thank
just a
you.
little reminder that you have in addition to all that you give, that you have a life to live, and we appreciate
Absolutely.
all the ways that you're giving helps others, and hopefully it also nourishes yourself. Do hope you go to Spain. Is there a website or anything that you want to share about the resource group?
Well, right now we're purely on Meetup.
Okay,
So it's,
I can type it in if you wanna tell me.
yeah, give me just 1 second and
Okay.
I will get it for you. It is meetup.com/gay. Actually, I could probably just gay dash 50 LGBT dash Greensboro. I could have probably.
That's okay because look, I think this is it on the screen. At least that's close, or if you search for it, and we can also always put it in the comments if that's off at all. Does that look right?
Yeah, yeah, I'll.
Okay. And it looks like, yeah, you also put something in the private chat that has that. And I can go ahead and put that in the comment section so people can see it and find out
Yeah,
more and learn about you. And
yeah.
I want to just return to I'm so grateful to work with and for our team with Generation Plus at Blue Ridge Pride. People want to learn more about us. There's our URL. And we really believe strongly in the power of the story, which is why we have
No,
several projects going on right now, just like this one. And I'm so happy that we got to connect with you today. Steve,
well,
thank
thank
you
you.
for
Thank you.
showing up and sharing your story. And I know it inspired others. And we will see you all next month. And we get to have a conversation with Diane King. And that is going to be our August Rainbow Inspiration, which is August 3rd. We'll see you here then. So thanks, Steve. We'll say bye
Thank
to
you.
everybody for now. Bye bye.
Bye bye.